Mike stared at the pile of divorce papers on his kitchen table and rubbed his tired eyes. 3 months had passed since his wife moved out, and the house still felt like a museum. Everything was exactly where she'd left it, except now it all seemed pointless. The fancy coffee machine gathered dust. The dining room table that seated 8 now held nothing but takeout containers and unpaid bills. His daughter Lily was the only bright spot in this mess. Every other weekend, she burst through the front door like sunshine, filling the empty rooms with her 8-year-old energy. But even those visits felt different now, awkward, like they were both trying too hard to pretend everything was normal. It was during one of those visits that everything changed. Lily had been unusually quiet all morning, picking at her cereal and staring out the window. Finally, she looked up at him with those big brown eyes that reminded him so much of her mother. "Dad, can we go somewhere fun today?" Mike glanced around the house. He'd been planning to tackle the growing pile of laundry and maybe fix the leaky faucet. Exciting stuff, sure, kiddo. Where do you want to go? The animal shelter. Mike nearly choked on his coffee. The what now? My friend Katie got a puppy from there last month. She says they have lots of dogs that need homes. Can we just look, please? Every practical bone in Mike's body screamed no. He was barely keeping up with his mortgage payments. His job at the insurance company was hanging by a thread after he'd missed too many days during the divorce proceedings. The last thing he needed was vet bills and chewed furniture. But something in Lily's hopeful expression made him nod. "Just looking, okay? We're not getting anything." The Riverside Animal Shelter sat on the edge of town in a converted warehouse that had seen better days. The parking lot was full of families with excited kids, and Mike already regretted this decision. Inside, the smell of disinfectant mixed with something he couldn't quite identify hit him immediately. A volunteer named Beth, probably in her 60s with kind eyes and a shirt covered in dog hair, greeted them at the front desk. "First time here?" "Just browsing," Mike said quickly. "My daughter wanted to see some dogs." Beth smiled knowingly. "Of course. Let me show you around." They walked past rows of kennels, each one holding a different story. There was a tiny Chihuahua mix that yapped at everyone who passed, an old golden retriever that barely lifted his head to acknowledge visitors, a pit bull mix that wagged so hard his whole body shook. Then they reached the last kennel. The dog inside was unlike any of the others. She sat perfectly still in the back corner, watching them with mismatched eyes. One brown, one blue. Her black and tan coat looked recently brushed, but there was something in her posture that spoke of resignation. "That's Luna," Beth said softly. "She's been with us for about 2 months now." Lily pressed her face against the chain-link gate. "She's beautiful. Why is she still here?" Beth's expression grew sad. "She's been returned twice. The first family said she was too energetic. The second one said she had separation anxiety. She gets nervous when left alone and, well, sometimes that leads to accidents." Mike felt a familiar knot in his stomach. He knew all about feeling abandoned and anxious. "How old is she?" 3 years old. German Shepherd mix, probably with some husky thrown in. "She's actually very smart. Just needs the right person to understand her," as if she'd heard the conversation. Luna stood up and walked slowly to the front of her kennel. She didn't jump or bark like the other dogs. Instead, she sat down and simply looked at them. There was something almost human in her gaze, a quiet intelligence that made Mike uncomfortable. "Can we pet her?" Lily asked. Before Mike could object, Beth was unlocking the kennel door. "She's very gentle with kids." Luna stepped out carefully. As if she didn't want to make any sudden moves, she approached Lily first, allowing the little girl to scratch behind her ears. Her tail wagged once, tentatively. Then she turned to Mike. For a moment, they just stared at each other. This dog had been given up twice. She probably expected to be disappointed again. Mike knew that feeling better than he cared to admit. "Dad," Lily whispered, "she likes you." Mike looked down to find Luna sitting right in front of him, her head tilted slightly to one side. Without thinking, he reached out and touched her head. Her fur was softer than he expected. She leaned into his hand, just a little. She's usually more cautious with men, Beth observed. "You must have a gentle way about you." Mike almost laughed. Gentle. His ex-wife would disagree. But something about this quiet dog made him feel calmer than he had in months. What would it cost to adopt her? The question came out before he could stop it. Besides lit up. The adoption fee is $100. That includes her shots, spaying, and a microchip. But honestly, for Luna, I'd be willing to work something out if money's tight. Money was tight. Everything was tight. But as Mike looked at his daughter's hopeful face and Luna's patient expression, practical concerns seemed less important. 20 minutes later, they were loading a bag of dog food and a nervous German Shepherd mix into his Honda Civic. Luna sat perfectly still in the back seat, as if she didn't want to do anything that might change their minds. The ride home was quiet except for Lily's excited chatter about dog names and where Luna would sleep. Mike kept glancing in the rearview mirror, watching this dog who had somehow become his responsibility. By the time they pulled into his driveway, reality was setting in. He had no idea how to take care of a dog. He worked long hours. His house wasn't exactly pet-friendly, and according to Beth, Luna had issues with being left alone. But as he opened the car door and Luna stepped out onto the grass, looking around her new neighborhood with cautious hope, Mike made a decision. They would figure it out together. After all, they were both starting over. That first night was rough. Luna paced the house for hours, investigating every corner. She whined at the back door, even though Mike had taken her outside 3 times, when he finally went to bed, leaving her in the kitchen with a soft blanket and a bowl of water. The whimpering started at 2 in the morning. Mike found himself sitting on the kitchen floor in his pajamas, wondering what he'd gotten into. Luna sat a few feet away, watching him with those mismatched eyes. "I don't know what I'm doing," he told her quietly. "I can barely take care of myself right now." Luna tilted her head, as if considering his words. Then she did something unexpected. She lay down, right there on the cold tile floor, and rested her chin on her paws. Not demanding anything, not trying to escape or destroy something, just accepting that this was where she was now. Mike stared at this dog who had every reason to be anxious and upset, yet seemed determined to make the best of things. Maybe they could learn from each other. "Okay, girl," he whispered. "Let's see how this goes." As the first light of dawn crept through the kitchen window, both of them finally fell asleep on the floor. It wasn't comfortable, and it certainly wasn't what Mike had planned for his life. But somehow, for the first time in months, the house didn't feel quite so empty. The first month with Luna was like learning to live with a roommate who spoke a different language. Mike would come home from work to find his favorite running shoes chewed beyond recognition, or discover that Luna had somehow managed to knock over the trash can and spread garbage across the kitchen floor. Each incident sent him spiraling into doubt about his decision. Maybe this was a mistake, he muttered to himself one evening, sweeping up the remains of what used to be his coffee table book about classic cars. Luna sat in the corner, head down, tail tucked between her legs. She knew she'd done something wrong, but Mike could see the anxiety radiating from her like heat. The worst part wasn't the destroyed belongings. It was the howling, every morning. When Mike left for work, Luna would start crying the moment she heard his car keys jingle. Mrs. Patterson next door had already knocked on his door twice to complain about the noise. The first time she was polite about it, the second time, not so much. Mike tried everything he could think of. He bought Luna puzzle toys to keep her busy. He left the radio on for company. He even tried sneaking out without his keys, only to have Luna somehow sense his departure anyway. The howling would start before he even reached his car. Work became his escape, which was ironic since he'd never liked his job at the insurance office. But at least there, he didn't have to worry about what destruction waited for him at home. His coworkers started noticing his distracted state during meetings. "Everything okay, Mike?" his supervisor Jana asked one afternoon. "You seem pretty stressed lately." Mike almost told her about Luna, but stopped himself. How could he explain that he was being outsmarted by a dog? Instead, he just shrugged and said he was dealing with some personal stuff. The breakthrough came on a particularly rough Tuesday in October. Mike had been called into a meeting with a difficult client who was threatening to cancel their policy over a claim dispute. The meeting went badly, really badly. By the time Mike got home, he felt like he'd been run over by a truck. He opened the front door expecting the usual scene of chaos. Instead, he found Luna sitting quietly by the window, watching him with those mismatched eyes. For once, nothing was destroyed. The house was exactly as he left it. "Good girl," he said. More from surprise than praise. Luna's tail wagged once, cautiously. She approached him slowly, as if testing his mood. When Mike sat down heavily on the couch, Luna did something she'd never done before. She rested her head on his knee and just stayed there. Mike felt something break loose in his chest. All the frustration and loneliness he'd been carrying around for months came pouring out. He cried right there on his couch, with a dog he barely knew offering the only comfort available. Luna didn't move. She didn't try to lick his face or jump around like dogs do in movies. She just stayed present, solid and warm against his leg, as if she understood that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is simply be there. That night, Mike made a decision. Instead of leaving Luna in the kitchen, he moved her bed into his bedroom. Not on the bed, just nearby where she could see him. For the first time since the adoption, both of them slept through the night. The change was gradual but noticeable. Mike started paying more attention to Luna's body language, learning to read the signs that meant she was getting anxious. Her ears would flatten slightly, and she'd start pacing near the front door. When he saw these signals, he'd sit with her for a few minutes before leaving, speaking in calm tones until she relaxed. Luna, for her part, seemed to be studying Mike just as intently. She learned his routines quickly. She knew the difference between him getting dressed for work and getting dressed to go somewhere fun. She could tell by the way he moved around the house whether he was having a good day or a bad one. The morning walks became the ritual. At first, Mike saw them as just another chore, something necessary to keep Luna healthy. But slowly, he began to look forward to those quiet 20 minutes before the world demanded his attention. Luna would trot beside him, occasionally stopping to investigate interesting smells, but always checking to make sure he was still there. During one of these walks, Mike realized he was actually relaxing for the first time in months. The steady rhythm of their footsteps, the fresh morning air, Luna's quiet presence beside him. It was better than any meditation app he'd tried. "You know what, girl?" he said to Luna as they reached the corner of Maple Street. "Maybe we're both learning something here." Luna looked up at him with what Mike swore was understanding in her eyes. The real test came when Lily visited for her scheduled weekend. Mike had been nervous about how Luna would react to having a child in the house again. But Luna seemed to remember Lily from their first meeting at the shelter. She was gentle and patient, even when Lily got excited and wanted to play games that involved running around the house. "Dad, Luna is so much calmer than before," Lily observed on Sunday morning as they all sat in the backyard. Luna was lying in the grass nearby, content to watch them eat breakfast on the patio. Mike realized his daughter was right. The anxious, destructive dog from those first weeks had transformed into something else entirely. Not perfect. She still had moments of worry when left alone, but manageable, peaceful even. "I think she just needed time to trust us," Mike said, scratching Luna behind the ears. That afternoon, as Mike was driving Lily back to her mother's house, his daughter said something that stuck with him. "Luna reminds me of you, Dad." "What do you mean?" "When you and Mom first got divorced, you were really sad and worried all the time. But now you seem better. Like Luna." Mike glanced in the rearview mirror at Luna, who was sitting calmly in the back seat, watching the world go by. His daughter was more perceptive than he'd given her credit for. He and Luna had been healing at the same pace, learning to trust again. Together, by the end of that second month, Mike's house felt different. Not just because Luna was there, but because the whole atmosphere had changed. There was a routine now, a rhythm that made sense. Morning walks, work, evening training sessions where they practiced basic commands. Then quiet time on the couch before bed. Luna still had accidents occasionally, and Mike still felt overwhelmed by the responsibility sometimes. But they were figuring it out together, two anxious souls learning that maybe, just maybe, they didn't have to face their fears alone. The night Mike realized how much things had changed was when he came home from a particularly long day at work. Instead of dreading what he might find, he was actually looking forward to seeing Luna. She greeted him at the door with a wagging tail and bright eyes. And for the first time in over a year, Mike felt genuinely happy to be home. Winter arrived early that year, and with it came Mike's lowest point since the divorce. The insurance company was restructuring, and layoffs were in the air. His ex-wife had started dating someone new, which shouldn't have bothered him, but somehow did. The bills kept coming, but the bank account kept shrinking. On the worst days, Mike would lie in bed listening to his alarm go off, wondering what the point was of getting up at all. But then Luna would appear beside the bed, her cold nose nudging his hand, her tail wagging with an enthusiasm that seemed completely unreasonable given the circumstances. "Come on, girl," he'd grumble. 5 more minutes. But Luna had no concept of 5 more minutes. She had a routine, and routines mattered. Walk first, then breakfast, then whatever the day brought. She didn't worry about tomorrow or regret yesterday. She lived in the moment with a completeness that Mike envied. So he'd drag himself out of bed, pull on his coat, and step into the cold morning air. Those walks became his lifeline, not because he enjoyed them particularly, but because Luna needed them. And somehow, taking care of her needs helped him remember he had needs too. The changes started small. Mike began noticing things during their walks that he'd never paid attention to before. The way frost formed different patterns on different types of leaves. How Mrs. Chen from 3 houses down always waved from her kitchen window. The fact that the sunrise looked completely different depending on the weather. Luna seemed to take credit for these discoveries. She paused at interesting spots, as if to say, "Look at this, isn't this worth getting up for?" When the company announced they were moving to mandatory work-from-home schedules to cut costs, Mike panicked. Working from home meant being isolated. All day, just him and his thoughts and a computer screen. But Luna had different plans. She appointed herself as his office manager every morning. She'd follow him to the small room he converted into a workspace and settle down beside his desk, not demanding attention, just present. When Mike got stressed during phone calls with difficult clients, he'd reach down and scratch her ears. The simple act of touching her soft fur somehow made everything seem more manageable. During video meetings, Luna's collar would occasionally jingle as she shifted positions, and colleagues would ask about the dog sounds in the background. Mike found himself smiling as he explained Luna's daily routine and her habit of sighing dramatically whenever meetings ran long. "Sounds like she has the right idea about office efficiency," his supervisor Jana commented during one particularly tedious budget review. Everyone laughed, and Mike realized he felt lighter than he had in months. Luna also had strong opinions about lunch breaks. At exactly noon every day, she'd appear beside Mike's chair and stare at him until he acknowledged her. If he tried to work through lunch, she'd become increasingly persistent, eventually placing her paw on his arm as if to say, "Enough, time to take care of yourself." These midday breaks became sacred time. Mike would make a sandwich, and they'd sit on the back porch together, Luna watching the backyard with intense interest while Mike actually tasted his food. For the first time in months, the real lesson came in March, when Mrs. Chen fell on the icy steps outside her house. Mike heard the commotion from his home office and looked out to see his elderly neighbor, sitting on her front walk, clearly in pain. Without thinking, he grabbed his coat and Luna's leash. Luna seemed to understand immediately that this was different from their usual walks. She approached Mrs. Chen carefully, settling down beside her with unusual gentleness. While Mike called for an ambulance and helped Mrs. Chen stay warm, Luna remained perfectly still, as if she knew her job was simply to provide comfort. "Your dog has a healing spirit," Mrs. Chen said later from her hospital bed, her hip surgery having gone well. "She knew exactly what I needed." Mike was surprised by how good it felt to help someone else. 4 months. He'd been so focused on his own problems that he'd forgotten how satisfying it could be to make a difference in someone else's life. Luna seemed to have reminded him of something important about being human. Word spread quickly in their small neighborhood about Mike and Luna's quick response to Mrs. Chen's accident. Within a week, neighbors he barely knew were asking if he could help with small tasks. Could he walk Mrs. Johnson's arthritic old terrier when she had doctor appointments? Would Luna be okay visiting the Martinez family's kids, who were scared of dogs but curious about the gentle one they'd heard about? Luna thrived on these interactions. She seemed to have an instinct for reading people's needs. With nervous children, she moved slowly and kept her distance until they felt safe. With lonely elderly neighbors, she offered her head for petting and seemed content to sit quietly for as long as they needed company. Mike started carrying dog treats in his pocket during their walks, not just for Luna, but for the other dogs they meet. He learned the names of neighbors he'd lived near for 3 years without ever speaking to. Mrs. Patterson, who had complained about Luna's howling, became one of their regular stops after she admitted she missed having a dog of her own. The transformation wasn't just in how others saw Mike and Luna. Mike was changing too. The morning walks that had once felt like a chore became his favorite part of the day. He started looking forward to the small interactions with neighbors. The way Luna's tail wagged when she saw her favorite people. The simple satisfaction of being useful to his community. His work improved too. The clients who had once seemed impossible to please started commenting on his patience and positive attitude. Mike realized that Luna's approach to life, focusing on the present moment, treating each interaction as important, maintaining optimism despite past disappointments, was actually excellent customer service. Training. One evening in late spring, Mike was sitting on his back porch with Luna, watching her investigate interesting smells in the grass. His phone buzzed with a text from his ex-wife. "Lily says you seem really happy lately. She's excited about her weekend with you and Luna." Mike looked down at Luna, who had abandoned her investigation to come sit beside his chair. 6 months ago, he'd been a reluctant dog owner who couldn't understand why anyone would voluntarily take on such responsibility. Now, he couldn't imagine his life without this patient teacher who had shown him how to find joy in simple things. "You know what, girl?" he said, scratching behind her ears. "I think you might be the best thing that ever happened to me." Luna's tail thumped against the porch boards, and Mike could swear she was smiling. She'd taken a broken man who was barely surviving and taught him how to live again, not through grand gestures or dramatic changes, but through the daily practice of showing up, paying attention, and caring for something beyond himself. As the sun set behind the trees in his backyard, Mike realized that Luna hadn't just become his companion. She'd become his guide back to the person he'd forgotten how to be. It happened on a Tuesday morning in June, exactly 18 months after Mike had adopted Luna. They were halfway through their usual walk around the neighborhood when Luna suddenly stopped moving, not the normal pause to sniff something interesting, but a complete halt that made Mike's heart skip a beat. "Come on, girl," Mike said gently, tugging on the leash. "What's wrong?" Luna tried to take a step forward and stumbled. Her back legs seemed to give out for just a moment before she caught herself. She looked up at Mike with confusion in her mismatched eyes, as if asking him to explain what was happening to her body. Mike knelt down beside her, running his hands along her legs and back, checking for obvious injuries. Nothing seemed broken or swollen, but something was definitely wrong. Luna had never been clumsy. She was the most graceful dog he'd ever known. "It's okay," he whispered, more to calm himself than her. "Let's go home and see how you feel." The walk back took twice as long as usual. Luna moved carefully, as if she didn't trust her own legs anymore. Mike's mind raced through possibilities. Maybe she'd pulled a muscle. Maybe she'd stepped on something sharp. Maybe it was nothing serious. But deep down, he knew this wasn't nothing. By evening, Luna's condition had worsened. She struggled to stand up from her bed, and when she did manage to get to her feet, her back legs wobbled uncertainly. Mike spent the night on the floor beside her, watching her breathe, checking on her every few minutes. The emergency vet clinic was busy when Mike carried Luna through the front doors. The next morning, at 70 pounds, she wasn't easy to lift. But she didn't resist. That scared Mike more than anything else. Luna always had opinions about being picked up. Dr. Martinez was a kind woman in her 50s who examined Luna with gentle hands and a serious expression. She moved Luna's legs carefully, tested her reflexes, and asked Mike detailed questions about when the symptoms had started. "I need to run some tests," she said finally, "but based on what I'm seeing, I'm concerned about a condition called degenerative myelopathy. It affects the spinal cord and causes progressive weakness in the back legs." The word progressive hit Mike like a punch to the stomach. What does that mean exactly? Dr. Martinez sat down across from him, her expression compassionate. But honest, it means it gets worse over time. There's no cure, but there are treatments that can slow the progression and help maintain quality of life. For a while, Mike felt the room spinning slightly. How long do dogs usually? It varies widely. Some dogs live comfortably for years. With proper care, others decline more quickly. We won't know Luna's timeline until we see how she responds to treatment. The test confirmed Dr. Martinez's suspicions. Luna had degenerative myelopathy, and the treatment plan was expensive. Physical therapy twice a week, daily medications. Eventually, she might need a wheelchair for her back legs. The estimated costs made Mike's head swim. That evening, Mike sat in his car in the vet clinic parking lot with the treatment estimates in his lap. His savings account had barely recovered from the divorce expenses. His job was stable now, but it wasn't exactly high-paying. The second mortgage he'd taken to consolidate debt was already stretching his budget thin. His phone buzzed with a text from his ex-wife. "Lily told me Luna is sick. Maybe it's time to consider what's best for everyone." Mike knew what she meant without her having to say it directly. Putting Luna down would solve the financial problem quickly and painlessly. It was the practical choice, the responsible choice, even. Luna was sleeping in the passenger seat, her head resting on a blanket Mike had brought from home, even unconscious. From the mild sedative they'd given her for the tests, she looked peaceful, trusting. Mike thought about all the mornings Luna had gotten him out of bed, when depression tried to keep him there. All the times she'd sat quietly beside him during difficult phone calls at work. The way she'd helped him connect with his neighbors and rebuild his relationship with Lily. The patient way she'd taught him that love meant showing up consistently, even when it was hard. How could he abandon her now, when she needed him most? Mike started the car and drove home. That night, he called his bank about increasing his line of credit. He researched second jobs he could do from home in the evenings. He even looked into selling his car and buying something older and cheaper. The next morning, he called Dr. Martinez's office and scheduled Luna's first physical therapy appointment. The following months tested every bit of patience and creativity Mike had developed. Luna's condition progressed slowly but steadily. First, she needed help getting up the stairs to his bedroom. Then she needed assistance getting into the car. For her therapy appointments, eventually, Mike had to carry her outside for bathroom breaks. The financial strain was real. Mike picked up freelance bookkeeping work in the evenings after his regular job. He canceled his cable subscription, started buying generic groceries, and gave up eating out entirely. Every penny went toward Luna's care or basic household expenses. But something unexpected happened during those difficult months. The neighborhood rallied around them in ways Mike never could have imagined. Mrs. Chen, fully recovered from her hip surgery, started a collection among the neighbors to help with Luna's vet bills. The envelope she handed Mike contained nearly $800 in a note that read, "For the dog who teaches us all about loyalty." The Martinez family's teenage son offered to help with Luna's physical therapy exercises. Having learned about canine rehabilitation in his veterinary science class, Mrs. Patterson, the neighbor who had once complained about Luna's howling, brought over homemade dog treats specifically formulated for senior dogs with mobility issues. Lily threw herself into Luna's care with the intensity only a 10-year-old could muster. She researched canine physical therapy exercises online and created a daily routine. For Luna's weekend visits, she even started a blog called Luna's Journey to document their experiences and connect with other families dealing with similar challenges. Dad, she said one Saturday morning as they helped Luna with her leg exercises, "I'm really proud of you for not giving up on her." Mike felt tears prick his eyes. His daughter was learning lessons about commitment and compassion that no classroom could teach. The hardest day came when Dr. Martinez explained that Luna would benefit from a wheelchair for her back legs. The device cost $1,500, money Mike simply didn't have. That's when his co-workers at the insurance company surprised him. Jana, his supervisor, presented him with a check from their office fundraiser. "Luna helped you become the best customer service rep we've ever had," she said with a smile. "Consider this an investment in our team's success." The day Luna got her wheelchair was a day Mike would never forget. She approached the device with the same cautious curiosity she'd shown toward everything new in her life. Within an hour, she was racing around the backyard, her front legs doing all the work while the wheels supported her back end. Watching Luna adapt to her new reality with such grace and determination, Mike realized something profound had happened in fighting for Luna's life. He discovered reserves of strength and purpose he didn't know he possessed. The man who had once felt overwhelmed by basic responsibilities had become someone who could handle crisis. With calm determination, Luna might have lost the use of her back legs, but she'd helped Mike find something he'd lost years ago: the knowledge that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice you make every single day, especially when things get difficult. 2 years after Luna's diagnosis, Mike woke up to find her sitting by the bedroom window in her favorite morning spot, watching the sunrise. Her wheelchair was parked nearby, but she didn't need it for everything yet. Her front legs were still strong, and her determination remained unshakable. "Good morning, beautiful," Mike said, scratching behind her ears. Luna's tail thumped against the floor, and she turned to look at him with those mismatched eyes that still held all the intelligence and warmth they'd always had. Their morning routine had evolved over the years. Mike would carry Luna downstairs, help her into her wheelchair for their walk, then lift her back out when they returned home. It sounds like a lot of work when you describe it like that, but to Mike, it just felt like taking care of someone he loved. The neighborhood had changed too. What started as a few neighbors helping with Luna's care had grown into something bigger. Mike's blog about their journey, which began as simple updates for concerned friends, now had thousands of followers from around the world. People shared their own stories of caring for disabled pets, asked for advice, and offered support to each other. Luna's legacy had become more than just a blog. It was a community. The real surprise came when a local news station reached out for an interview. The reporter, a young woman named Jessica, had been following their story online after her own dog was diagnosed with a similar condition. "Your story gives people hope," she explained as her camera crew set up in Mike's backyard. "You show that love doesn't end when things get difficult." The interview aired on a Tuesday evening. Mike had been nervous about being on television, but Luna took to it naturally, sitting calmly beside him in her wheelchair, occasionally looking at the camera as if she understood exactly what was happening. The response was overwhelming. Mike's email filled with messages from people around the country sharing their own stories. A retired veterinarian in Oregon offered to consult on difficult cases for free. A company that made pet wheelchairs donated equipment to families who couldn't afford it. A publisher contacted Mike about turning his blog into a book. But the message that meant the most came from his ex-wife. "Lily and I watched your interview together. She's so proud of her dad, and honestly, so am I. You've become the man I always knew you could be." The book project became a family affair. Lily, now 12 and an excellent writer, helped Mike organize their stories and photos. She insisted on including a chapter about what Luna had taught her about responsibility and compassion. "Luna showed me that taking care of someone isn't a burden," she wrote in her contribution. "It's a privilege. When you love someone, you show up for them, especially when they need you most." Reading his daughter's words, Mike realized that Luna had given them something precious beyond her companionship. She had taught Then both what real love looked like in action. The book's success led to speaking engagements at veterinary conferences and pet owner support groups. Mike found himself traveling to different cities, always with Luna by his side in her specially designed travel wheelchair. She seemed to enjoy meeting new people, and audiences loved her calm presence and expressive eyes. During one presentation in Denver, an elderly man approached Mike afterward with tears in his eyes. "My wife has been sick for 3 years," he said quietly. "I've been thinking it's too hard, that maybe it's time to consider other options. But watching you and Luna, seeing how happy you both are despite the challenges, I think I understand now that love means staying, not leaving." Mike felt overwhelmed by the weight of the man's words. Luna's story wasn't just about a dog anymore. It had become about the choice to love completely, regardless of the cost or difficulty. At home, their daily life had settled into a rhythm that felt natural and peaceful. Luna still needed help with many things, but she had adapted to her limitations with remarkable grace. She had learned to navigate the house efficiently in her wheelchair, could still play gentle games of fetch, and remain the neighborhood's unofficial therapy dog. Mrs. Chen, now in her 80s, visited every Thursday afternoon for tea and Luna time. "She has healing energy," the elderly woman insisted. "My doctor says my blood pressure is better than it's been in years, and I know it's because of my time with Luna." The Martinez family's youngest daughter, who had been afraid of dogs before meeting Luna, now wanted to become a veterinarian. "Luna taught me that being different doesn't mean being less," the 8-year-old told Mike seriously. "I want to help other animals like her." These stories accumulated over time, creating a ripple effect that Mike never could have imagined. When he first brought home an anxious rescue dog, Luna had become a teacher, not just for Mike and Lily, but for an entire community. On a quiet Sunday evening in October, 5 years after the adoption, Mike sat on his back porch with Luna resting beside him. The sun was setting through the trees, painting everything in golden light. Luna's breathing was peaceful and steady, her head resting on Mike's lap. Lily was inside doing homework, occasionally calling out questions about her math problems. The house felt full of life and purpose in a way it never had before Luna arrived. Mike thought about the broken man he'd been when he first walked into that animal shelter. Divorced, depressed, barely able to take care of himself, let alone another living being. He thought he was rescuing Luna, but the truth was so much more complex. They had rescued each other, but Luna had done something even more profound. She had taught him that healing happens through the daily practice of showing up with love, patience, and commitment. She had shown him that strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up every time. Together, Luna stirred slightly and looked up at him with those wise, mismatched eyes. Her tail gave a small wag, as if she knew exactly what he was thinking. "Thank you," Mike whispered, scratching behind her ears, "for everything." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Mike realized that Luna's greatest gift wasn't just the love she'd given him. It was the person she'd helped him become, someone capable of loving completely, showing up consistently, and finding joy in the simple act of caring for another soul. Luna had started as just his dog, but somewhere along the way, she had become his teacher, his inspiration, and the bridge back to the best version of himself. In learning to be worthy of her trust, Mike had learned to be worthy of his own life again. The girl at the shelter had been right all those years ago, when she said Luna just needed the right person to understand her. But Mike knew now that the real magic happened when two broken souls found each other and decided to heal together, one day at a time.